G'day, welcome to the Financial Bloke Podcast, the podcast for people seeking the wisdom needed to grow their family's wealth and live a happier, healthier and more prosperous life. My name's Ben Law and I am the Financial Bloke. As a kid, I was a stubborn little bugger. And if I'm being honest with myself, not much has changed. You see, I've come to realise that we're all blessed with different drivers in life, and mine is when someone tells me I can't do something. Nothing puts fuel on the fire for me more than when someone says or infers that I can't do it. I'm not saying that it's an overly healthy form of motivation, but it's what I've got. Both my financial advice business and the Financial Bloke came about because someone laid down the challenge and told me I couldn't do it. And I got the fire in my belly and said, this sounds like a worthy opponent. So when our guest reached out, I knew she was cut from the same cloth as me, but a level way above. Rejected by countless publishing companies, hit by a truck, crushed by a horse, and resuscitated back to life, not once, not twice, but 3 times. She's been carless, jobless, moneyless, and homeless, but she's never been hopeless. She's always been driven to promote the Australian ag industry, and these days it's through the power of visual storytelling. It wasn't the easiest road, but she is one tough, determined, and passionate lady. She's the author of 5 books, and more recently, the founder of AgriShots. Her name's Alice Mabin, or Al, and she marches to the beat of her own drum. Now, other than a really cool story, you're probably wondering why I've got Al on today. Well, I believe that one of the best ways to increase your happiness and fulfillment in life is by doing things that will make you proud of yourself, which in turn builds self-esteem. This often inoculates you against chronic negative emotions such as self-doubt and even anxiety and depression, and will change the way you view the world. And the best way I know to be proud of yourself is to do something hard, something that really challenges you, even if you fail. Because if you practice taking risks and being courageous, you'll eventually become proud of yourself, and that will have what I call a positive feedback loop. Our story is the story of being scared to death, but finding the courage to take the risk, beat the odds, and ultimately invite adventure into her heart. Someone we can all learn a lot from. So without further delay, welcome Al.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. It's great to have you on, Al. Now, Al, stories are one of the most powerful tools available to humans, and you've kind of dedicated your life to visual storytelling through not only your books, but also now AgriShots. And one of the defining characteristics of your life is your ability to overcome adversity. And one of those challenges you faced was being addicted to vodka at a really young age, which I think will pretty much shock people. Can you run us all through your story, Al?
Yeah, sure. Well, before I kind of dive into that particular story, let's just address the elephant in the room. I am a Kiwi. My accent gives me away. I was born and bred on the land, and I moved to Australia in 2007. I fell in love with the country, and actually today is a very poignant day for me because I'm actually becoming a fully fledged citizen of Australia.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. So vodka, yes. I mean, addictions are quite a common thing in the world today, and they're often really hard to curb. And I developed one really early on in my life. So as you led on to everyone, as a child, vodka was my addiction. I was introduced to vodka when I was 6 years old, and I know the listeners will be sniggering over my Kiwi accent because the word sex sounds like sex, I know. But vodka at 6, like what the How irresponsible could one's parents really be giving a child vodka? But to me, the smell of vodka made the hairs in my nose twitch and tingle. Vodka was bulletproof and smooth. Sometimes I'd wash it down with water. As a child, my mother projected an idea to the outside world that our family was perfect, but clearly it wasn't. My imagination was really stomped on as a kid, but I was a straight A student. I made sure that I got really good grades so that my mum would leave me alone. I really hated going home after school. I always had a pit in my stomach at the end of the day when the bell rang, but secretly I knew that I had vodka and everything was going to be okay. When I had vodka, my imagination would run wild. Anything was possible. My dreams seemed so achievable. Vodka was really an escape for me from my shitty home life. And often I'd sneak out at night to get away from the yelling and the screaming in the house. Vodka was the only thing I had to turn to when I was ignored for weeks at a time. And I know that you're listening and you're probably a bit shocked, but vodka wasn't a drink. Vodka was the name of my first pony. She was brown with 4 white socks and a heart as big as the universe. And growing up, I had more profound connections with animals than I did with people because they didn't judge me. They didn't label me. We really understood each other at a deep, unspoken level. And when life was really tough with my parents, I'd sleep on vodka and feel her warmth and protection. And, when I wanted to experience freedom, I'd hop on it and I'd gallop to the top of a hill. When I wanted to face my fears, I'd jump fences to heights I'd never imagined possible. So I guess as a kid that hadn't really had their belief system tarnished by life and society, vodka really taught me that anything is possible. And she took me from the kindergarten ring to all the way to Grand Prix.
That's a cool story, Al. I love it.
It's a tough one. It really is a tough one for me. And I've actually just spent the weekend at a horse event, which I haven't done since I stopped riding horses 25 years ago. And it was actually quite an emotional experience to be there, and it brought back a lot of those memories. And then to tell that story today has kind of got me at the moment.
And it really highlights the way that the stories we tell ourselves in life can really change the way we view things, can't they? When I first heard that story, when you told me it, I was totally driven in, just going, how the hell? I've got a 7-year-old, it's like, holy dooly. How would a 7-year-old get that? And it was amazing how you'd wound such a challenging story with such a beautiful outcome with young vodka. So Al, you had a horse accident. Talk us through what happened there, mate, and how that changed the way you view the world. Because I know now, if people tell you can't do something, that's the fire in your belly, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as crazy as it sounds, I actually probably owe the drive and the get up and go that I have to that accident when I was 15. So I was eventing on a horse. I was trying to make the national team to come and compete against Australia, and I had a nasty accident on the cross country, and I was resuscitated there and then on the grounds. I was resuscitated again on the way to the hospital, and I was resuscitated again a week later. So doctors had said to my family I wouldn't walk and talk again. I went without oxygen for a really long time, and they said to me that I was going to have permanent brain damage, or I'm in a coma. So they're saying this to my family, that I'm going to have permanent brain damage. And, when I came out of the coma and they sort of explained the situation to me, I didn't even remember my name or anything. I just didn't want to accept their diagnosis. And I really made it my one and only goal to get back to full health. And there was actually a young guy that was in the hospital at the same time as me who'd fallen off a skateboard at the skateboard park, and he was in a really bad way. He had a proper brain injury, and to this day it's really impacted him for life, and I just made it my absolute goal to get back there. And I sort of knew I had it because there was a point, one of my daily therapies was a memory test, and I'd go to this therapy session and the doctors would say to me, what are the 3 things we gave you yesterday, Alice? And I could never remember. And then this guy, Jeremy, he got out of hospital. And I said, well, how did Jeremy get to go? Because, it felt like a prison. And they said, oh, he got his memory test right. And I was like, is that what you have to do to get out of here? So the next day I went to the memory test, got it wrong, gave me 3 new things, and it was iPhone, laptop, car. I just said it to myself the whole way through the rest of my therapy session, went straight back to my room, wrote it down. Next day I got up, I had my bags packed, ready to leave, and went into it, and I just rattled them off the top of my head. They didn't even ask me. I'm like, right, I'm out of here. And they're like, sorry, Alice, doesn't work like that. So they got me. But, I guess I feel like having got myself back there and leaving, I've really been given a second chance at life. So I don't take it for granted. And I appreciate it that it's not for everyone, but I sort of really struggle with routine and repetition. Maybe this is a side effect of my head injury, who knows? But I don't label it. I use it to my advantage. And I look at it and think everything happens for a reason. My accident happened for a reason. The good and the bad, it all happens for a reason. And I think, having developed the awareness to allow myself to see this instead of dwelling on the negative has been part of that big driver for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a quote, I put it out there recently. It was something along the lines of life is 10% what happens to you and 90% the meaning you attach to it. And I think that's the difference between people that take a very serious adverse event in their life and attach a positive meaning to it and the negative. And that's something that you seem to have been able to do. The other thing is like I have a real ADHD type personality, and I was chatting to someone the other day that has it really, really strong. And they said, I'm really struggling with concentration and focusing on things, etc. And they're really down on themselves. They said, I'm just really struggling. And my comment to them was, well, in many ways, this is your superpower. You've managed to build a great business. You've managed to juggle a whole heap of things. You're energized. You go quicker than everyone else. You make quick decisions. You readjust. I mean, this is your absolute superpower. I get the fact that there's some challenges with that, but even Superman had kryptonite. The Hulk couldn't control his rage. It's finding those things and turning them into your superpower. And one of the things that I've noticed with you too, Al, when we spoke is, you always seem to take the winding road less traveled rather than the well-trodden path that most people take. Do you think that's what's driven you to do that? Was those challenges in life, that injury? Or do you think that's just part of your personality type? Today's episode is brought to you by AgriCoach. You've worked bloody hard over the years and you've built a solid operation. But as your children grow up and start their own journeys, you're beginning to think about the next 5, 10, and even 15 years and how to keep driving the business forward and ensure a smooth and successful succession plan. Preparing the business, preparing the next generation, and preparing for your eventual retirement all requires a solid plan and a proven process. Unsure about the right steps to take? Head on over to agricoach.com.au/webinar to learn more about our Succession Proof Your Family webinar. AgriCoach, aligning families, growing wealth, and protecting legacies. And now, let's get back to the episode.
I think it is part of my personality type. I was always independent from the day I was born. I wanted to feed myself and do all of those things. But, I think that generally speaking, what most people do in life is they do admire their problems or they talk about the things they could have had or didn't have. And, I won't deny that taking risks is a really scary thing to do and taking the road less traveled is really tough. But life's too short, in my view, to not do what you love or follow your passion. So I look at it and I think, what's the worst that can happen? That it doesn't work out, that we fail? But I don't even look at it like failure because, I think about innovators, they need to have errors and failures because it's errors and failures that lead to new improved ideas, lead to new ways of doing things. So I think that the road less traveled and doing those things, it enables you to be malleable and constantly changing and adaptable to what keeps presenting in front of us. And I mean, the reality is the only constant we have in life these days is change. As an interesting story, I often go to Africa. In fact, most years I go to Africa. It's one of my favourite places to visit. It's kind of like Australia, but with wild animals. And my favourite animal to observe is the leopard. So I don't know if you're aware, but leopards are only successful at killing, capturing something to eat, 20% of the attempts that they make. Yet a leopard never stops trying because it's a matter of survival, right? But it also never judges itself or it doesn't think it's failed. Like they never take their mind off the job because if they don't catch something, they will perish. And I guess I look at that and I think, if we approached everything we do in our lives with that same degree of focus and confidence and dedication that a leopard has, then we can achieve anything. Like anything is possible. Things that are beyond our wildest dreams are achievable. And then risk and winding roads and different paths isn't really a risk. It's just a matter of focus and mindset, and we can achieve it.
So obviously, when you take the road less traveled or you do the things that people tell you you can't do, you obviously hit adversity. So we hit roadblocks. And for a lot of people, they hit the first roadblock, it knocks the wind out of them. They hit the second roadblock, they give up. Whereas truly successful people just keep hitting those roadblocks, finding a way to go around it, through it, or over it. When you hit those roadblocks, Al, how do you talk yourself through not just giving up?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I guess through doing a lot of self-development work and learning, what makes me tick and what helps me get in and out of those places when I find myself there. And obviously you have to be aware to identify that you've hit this place and you potentially are at a give up stage. But, I think back to when I launched my books and they're self-published, and the amount of people and businesses that said no to stocking my book because traditional bookshops wouldn't support me. So I had to try different avenues. And I think if I was paid $1 for every no, I'd be richer than what I've made off the books that that I've sold, because just so many people said it. But, I would come out of a shop and I knew that I had to not take that personally. I looked at it and thought, that's okay. They don't have the same vision as I do. They don't see the opportunity in this, but it's going to lead me to someone who does see it and really understands, what I've put together here in these books. And so, I'd walk out of that shop and I'd shake it off, and I'd actually just play with my dog in the park. I'd go and find somewhere to pull up for 5 minutes at a park somewhere, and I'd throw the ball for him and, have this unconditional love and dedication from my dog that would snap me out of that sort of not so great energy. And then I'd, go into another business with my high vibe and talk to them about what I had to offer and try again. I just learnt not to take it personally. It's really just information, and it's guiding me towards those people who are aligned with what I do and pushing me away from those who aren't.
Yeah, well, most really successful people have got used to thousands of no's. I mean, I think it was Thomas Edison. I'm going to get this wrong and make an idiot of myself, but I think he's something along the lines. He said, "I haven't had 1,000 failures. I've had 1,000 ways not to do something, and I've just had to learn from those." So, what I wrote down here when I was listening to you there, which was really important, was what's the lesson? I'm sure you got every time you go in and get a no. I'm guessing you'd reflect a little bit and go, "Okay, well, that didn't work because either one, they weren't on the same path as me, or the vision didn't connect, or number two is I got to change my pitch, or I've got to change my value proposition that I'm explaining to them."
Yeah, and actually to add to that, I was doing this all day, every day for so many years. I got to the point where I could walk into a shop and I'd just feel the vibe, and I'd be like, this is my shop or this is not my shop. And when I worked that out, for those that weren't my vibe, I just wouldn't even bother. I'd just leave again. So I'd be like, nah, I don't feel the vibe here that this is the type of business that would even be open to the idea. And in fact, there's a store in Emerald that I rang back when I was first launching my books. And I said, I'd like to talk to the owner about stocking the book. Nope, we don't stock books. Hung up on me. And you're like, oh, okay. Anyway, it was about 18 months later and I was going through Emerald and I thought, what's the worst that can happen? They can only say no again. But when you've got the physical books in your hands and they're a big product and you take them in, they have a sort of presence about them. So I wheeled in the door to this shop again, and the guy looks at me, no word of a lie, he looks at me over the counter and he said, "You're that girl I hung up to like over a year ago on the phone, aren't you?" And I was like, yeah, I am. Like how he remembered. I hadn't even said anything. And I put the book in front of him. He said, I got off that phone call and he said, I just knew that wasn't the right thing to have said. And he looked at the book and he went, of course we'll stock it. And they became one of my biggest sellers of all my books, which was, just a bit of a fascinating story and lovely people that, I've continued to connect with ever since.
Yeah. Well, you know what they say, every no's negotiable, isn't it?
I haven't heard that one, but yeah. I actually said to someone one day when I said, can you help me with this? I was trying to get into a series of BP roadhouses because it was a great opportunity. And we tried 10 times to ring someone and everyone kept saying no. And I was like, so if you can't say yes, can you tell me who can?
And did you get someone?
Yeah, we did. We got straight in there. Next phone call, it was in 50 BP roadhouses across Australia.
Yeah, because it's a really cool thing, isn't it? Because quite often when you get no's or you get the bad response, it's not because of you. It's not because of what you're selling or what you're trying to pitch that idea. You can just catch people on a bad day, can't you?
Or they are not the person who has the authority to actually say yes to that. And instead of taking the initiative to put you onto someone who can, they just say no. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and it's easy. They're busy. They've got other bigger problems to be dealing with than you introducing another problem into their lives.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And it's interesting. One of the things listening to there was 2 points I just want to make, which was really interesting, Al, was one was the change of state. Tony Robbins talks a lot about that is, when you came out of the shop, you got that no, which is, regardless of how many no's you've got, it's going to be a little bit of a punch in the guts. It's never going to be water off a duck's back completely. But by going out and playing with your dog, you completely changed your metabolic state, your mood, you elevate it, and it changes things completely, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as I've sort of always said to people, when you're so financially and emotionally invested in what you're doing, failure's not really an option and you'll always find a way. But those no's, when I was on the bones of my ass and I'd, spent every dollar in my bank account to print these books and you're getting a no and you're just thinking, oh my gosh. And all I could hear in the back of my mind was my old boss saying, you can't make a living out of photography, Alice. And I thought, maybe he's right, and so it really did hurt. And it took a lot to go, okay, how do I shift this? Because when you went into a shop and they saw it and they loved it and, they're telling you what they see because they're seeing it with their eyes for the first time. I've been looking at it constantly 24/7 for the whole production phase. When they see it, you hear their comments, it's like, oh, actually, this is something and it is amazing and it does have a place and people are impacted by it in a beautiful way and it is giving the recognition to these farmers. I mean, if I could just survive off those comments and didn't need to put fuel in my car to keep doing what I do, then that's enough for me.
Yeah. And look, one of the things I do, Al, is whenever I get a lovely email through, so I get emails through from people saying, I enjoy the podcast, I learned something, thank you, or even in my coaching business, get, quality feedback. And I'm not the sort of person that needs accolades or anything like that. But if I do get something really kind and nice comes through, I actually have a little wall in my room where I actually print it off and stick it on the wall. And for me, my state change is when I have a rough day, things may not be going perfectly in the world. Negative self-talk starts to come into my head. You're a loser. You don't know what you're doing. No one else has been able to do this. Well, you're not going to be able to do it, etc. I go back and I read those things and it's like the fuel that changes my state and gets me back on track. And I think there's some real power behind that.
Yeah, I've got a couple of videos which give you goosebumps when you watch them, and they're my go-to when I need to go to those places. I just put on one of these videos and I remind myself that this is cool stuff and, you've just got to push on through it.
Yeah. And one of the things that was interesting, Al, I interviewed a mate of mine by the name of Jeff Birchnell, who's got 3R Angus. And one of the things I talked about is there's two different personality types. There's two different categories I've observed. There's those that need external validation. So they need people to tell them, that's a good idea to reinforce that. And others that don't, that just have in their head, they make their mind up. Doesn't matter what anyone says. They just drive their way through. Which category do you fall into, do you think, Al?
Oh, gee, that's a really interesting question. I'd probably go for I'm a little bit of both. I value the feedback, but I'll see something. And essentially that's been how I've created my business, is that I've seen this gap in the market and gone, here's a gap and I'm going to fill this. And so that's what I've gone for. But then I'm happy to receive that feedback and sort of get a reassurance in some cases from people whose opinions I value that I'm on the right track with it, or to say, this is great, but have you thought about that? So I think I probably play a little bit in both categories there.
Yeah, and I think that's important. And you know what? The people that take the road less traveled or do the things that people tell them can't be done are people like Elon Musk. I mean, you can't make any money out of solar panels. You can't make any money out of electric cars. You can't make any money out of space. You can't make any money out of satellites. I mean, he's done it in all those areas. So sometimes the areas that people tell you can't do something is a very uncrowded space because no one else has given it a crack, are they?
That's right. And I think, as I said to you in a previous conversation, I'm a bit of in a non-rude way, I'm a bit of a, tell me I can't and I'll show you I can kind of girl. So it's been a big driver. And I think that, comes from my accident as well. So, yeah.
Which is good. Another one that I find really interesting, I heard the other day, quite a while ago, but it really resonated with me, Al, was our internal dialogue. when we're going through life and we hit these roadblocks, or people are telling us we can't do stuff, or we think we can't do stuff ourselves, all we get no's is this dialogue just keeps going on in our head. If we stop and listen, it's just continually going. And the technique they said to try and counteract that was to turn it into a conversation in your head. So when you are having those doubtful questions, is then to intellectually stop and go, well, is that actually true? Was that no because I've got a shit product or because I can't do it? Or did I just catch someone on the wrong day? Or am I not talking to the right person? And that can be a really powerful tool of harnessing that inner monologue or that inner voice that's telling us we can't do it, and start to challenge it. And then when you turn it from a monologue into a conversation, it can be really, really powerful. And I actually practice that quite often, because that little voice goes off in my head, you can't do this, Ben, etc., and say, well, is that true? You had this failed. Well, did it fail because I'm an idiot, or did it fail because I just didn't do it the right way?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, as a little story, I had a situation, it was sort of back in 2018. It was just after I launched the Grower books, actually. And I just copped so much criticism from people about them. Oh, why have you got them in there? Oh, of course they're in there. Why didn't you include this? Just loads and loads of criticism. And I really just needed to switch off. I just felt like my internal dialogue was just going off tap, and the inner critic was allowing that criticism to really jump on board and, dig the spurs in harder. And so I actually decided to do a bit of a Bear Grylls adventure. Changing
your state again.
Yeah.
Getting out of it and doing something completely different.
Yeah. So I was in Adelaide at the time, just finished giving a presentation in the Barossa Valley to this beautiful business. And instead of flying back to Queensland, I changed my ticket and I flew to New Zealand. And I rang a friend and I said, have you got an empty hut on the station? They said, yeah. And I said, have you got a swag I could borrow? They said, yeah. I said, righto, I'm going to make my way down to your place and have you got a gun I can use? And they were like, yeah, is everything okay, Alice? And I'm like, yeah, no, everything's fine. I'm just going to go and do a Bear Grylls adventure. And so I turned up and all I took with me was a dozen eggs and a jar of honey and this gun and the swag, and I camped out in this hut and I stayed there. It was right through Christmas and New Year. I lost complete track of time. Every day I would go walking in the mountains and I would write on a piece of paper whether I'd gone, north, south, east or west in case something happened to me out there. And I experienced 4 seasons, like snow, the whole shooting box I experienced while I was there. But the mind chatter, it took 3 days to actually get rid of all the crap that was going on in my head. And I thought, wow, just to observe it. And so, I'd get back from my walk and I'd shot a rabbit or I'd shot a wallaby, because there's wallabies in this region, and I had to, cut it up and cook it. And that's what I ate for 10 days. I just lived on whatever I could shoot. And I had the honey and the eggs in case things got really dire, but, I did all right. But it was that opportunity to really switch off and then really sit with myself and, be in that still space. And that's actually when it came to me that I needed to write my 5th book, which I did, The Winding Road. And so it's where I really started to dig out all of the backstory to my life. And I found the doctor that saved my life at the grounds, and I, got the medical records from the hospital and really unpacked it, because I just buried it under the carpet for all those years. So yeah, it's a big thing. And so, now obviously I do a lot more meditation. I don't have to do a Bear Grylls adventure to switch off, but that was how I learned how to do it, was I took myself out of everything, no social media, no nothing, to find it. And yeah, very busy in the mind.
Yeah. And you know what, Al, I think, because obviously pretty much everyone that listens to the podcast is in the ag space, and a lot of rural producers. And I think a lot of people could learn a lot from that, because they get caught up on farm 24 hours a day, living drought, flood, fire, commodity prices are down. They can sometimes get into a real negative funk. And, I had this conversation with someone last week where they dropped into complete funk, just couldn't get themselves out. And I'm like, you need a complete state change. You need a holiday. You need some time away. And they always come up with the excuses like, I can't because of. And I said, well, if you can't, you must. And that state change is really important. And that's why I wanted to sort of dig into that. And I think a lot of people see someone like yourself, Al, that's really driven, motivated, doing some amazing things and really, really smashing it out of the park. And they think, oh, you're so lucky. You must just always be positive and happy and optimistic. But it's not always that way. So thanks for sharing that. Now, I want to duck into AgriShots. So you've got a company which when I first started chatting with you, I went and checked it out and I was like, this is bloody amazing. So you've started AgriShots. Talk me through it. What is it?
Yeah, well, thank you for checking it out. AgriShots, I guess it's been in the making for 10 years, but the platform has been live for...
Overnight success.
Yeah, absolute overnight success.
Only a mere 10 years.
But it's been live now for nearly 3 years. So, if I think back to the 10 years ago, the Alice back then, the reason I couldn't produce it and launch it back then is because I had these control issues and I didn't want to let my stuff out there on the big wide web, so a lot of work has been done to bring it to fruition and get it to life. But I guess, I identified this gap in the market when I worked for Zoetis. So I used to work for them in animal health, and look, I loved my career with the company. I worked for them all over the world and got to work with amazing farmers and do great things. But I identified that, we never had good imagery or videos for our marketing purposes. And so I actually came back from a really big trip. I'd won overseas with them. And the next week I handed in my resignation. And I said, look, this is not me anymore. I'm going to go and follow this passion. So I quit my job and I'm walking down the street and I see a camera shop and I walk in the door and I'm like, can you please sell me the most expensive camera money can buy? And the guy just sort of looks at me, goes, sure, what have you been shooting with? And I was like, I've never owned a camera. He's like, right, well, what are you planning on doing with it? And I said, well, I'm going to become a professional photographer. And he just looked at me like, do you know how many people dream of doing that but don't? Anyway, that's kind of where the story started. And so I taught myself photography and, had this real affinity with obviously the land and whatnot. And so over the last 10 years, I've been, through producing the books and all of the other photo shoots and things I've been doing, I've created this library of images and videos that companies can use for their marketing purposes, for presentations, for social media, for pictures on your wall like you've got behind you, TV adverts, billboards, event backdrops. Kind of the possibilities are endless really as to how they can use them. So I guess it's, in a nutshell, it's an online platform that connects businesses to Australia's best collection of agricultural images and videos. And in the same way that you can download a shot from platforms like Shutterstock or Getty Images, which people are probably familiar with, AgriShots customers can subscribe to an ever-growing collection of more than 60,000 visuals and use them how they want to.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I know when I built my first website for my financial advice business, because I'm a bit like you, I'm a bit of a control freak and a jack of all trades. That's the problem of being a farmer's son. I could do everything myself. I've learnt that lesson like you over time, that's not a good, efficient use of my time. But the thing I found really fascinating back then was that everyone had the same photos on their website, their social medias, etc. It was just always that same. And you'll probably remember it, the guy with the check shirts, obviously in America, looks a little bit farm with a barn in the background or a tractor in the background, and everyone had the same. And what I found was when I tried to build my website and everyone else's, it just wasn't authentic and it wasn't real. But then when I went to AgriShots and obviously talked to you about that, there's some real power in having, if you are going to have a website or you are going to have some sort of marketing, whether you be a big company or a mum and dad show, having unique relevant images here in Australia of farming, if you're in the ag space, is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what makes AgriShots really unique to the alternatives that are out there is it's by ag people for ag people. So the content is authentic. It's not staged. First and foremostly, I'm off the land. And secondly, I've taught myself the creative side of what I do to sort of capture that gold. And so, I can read the play. I'm on farm a lot of the time. If I'm wanting content and headers or tractors or spray rigs or whatever, the best way for me to get it is for me to be in the seat. So I'll set cameras up all around the cab and capture the content that I need for clients. And I'm doing the driving, or I'm on a horse mustering a mob of cows and carrying a gimbal or flying a drone. So the farmers work out very quickly that you understand what's going on. You're not getting in the way or having to, can you just redo that again kind of stuff, because you can see how everything works to make it happen. And then it looks really natural. They're not sort of posed shots, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it is. And especially when bigger companies, you see a bank or some sort of agricultural supply company and they're using stock shitty images, doesn't connect with people. And so I think having those really relevant images can have a massive change in the way your consumers will actually interact with you or see your company. So how important do you think the visuals are then from a company point of view to have the right visuals?
Oh, look, they're massively important. I think one of the challenging things is that a lot of companies haven't identified ways to measure the impacts of those visuals. You know, we can often do it by social media likes. So how many likes do I get out of this? But then there's so many other algorithms and things at play that the time of day you put it up or whatever it might be can also have an impact on, you know, the sort of response and connection you might get with people. So it's a hard one to measure, but an image we process in, you know, a 13th of a millisecond. So an image says so much more than the words on a website, and people will often only read sort of 10 to 15% of the words they see on a website, where they'll watch a video, they'll take in a visual, and that starts to create more of an impact and more of a trust and a relationship with someone that, as I said, is harder to measure, but visuals are certainly going to make a bigger connection than words are.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed Brenda McDonald, who's a marketing expert from out at Toowoomba the other week. And one of the things that we talked about was the fact that one of the biggest problems for most businesses these days, including farmers and graziers, is attracting quality staff. You know, it's becoming harder and harder to find those right people. And what companies are starting to do now is their marketing is not to sell a product. Oh, sorry, it is to sell a product, but the product is their business. It's to build that brand awareness, to build the fact that it's a great place to work so that people start becoming attracted to them. So they're doing marketing campaigns to ultimately attract staff. And the thing with it is you don't want to be just doing that marketing when you need someone. You want to have that out in the marketplace, so you've got a lineup of people that want to come and work with you at any time. And those visuals are really, really important because, the younger people coming through or the families are coming through, if they can get a connection with your business or your location or what you're doing, you're going to have a far greater chance of attracting a quality operator. Or at the worst, Al, attracting more people that you can sift through and find the diamonds in the rough.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when I was a Jillaroo back in the day, it was such a big thing to have, Audrey or Bunnik on your resume. That was a ticket to get. And there's still a lot of those stations sort of down in that Riverina that sort of hold that astuteness. I think there's an element of that when you go to the territory as well. But gone are the days where a 50-word ad in the Land or the Stock and Journal or the Queensland Country Life is going to get you a quality employee. It's going to get you that top of the range person. As a business, we need to sell who we are and what we have on offer. And the other challenge that we have in ag is that we can't compete with mining money. So we've actually got to tell a different story. We've got to tell, a story of what else is on offer when people are coming to work in agriculture. And there's so much more to it than just working on the land. There's loads of other options for careers out there. And that's a kind of twofold element to AgriShots and what our mission is. So, number one, we obviously want to help agribusinesses access premium visuals to be able to use as they need. And we have, an unlimited download capacity through our subscriptions. But secondly is to give recognition to farmers for their stewardship of the land and showcase all of those amazing opportunities that are available across all of the industries within agriculture, because it is more than just, cows and sheep and growing crops. There's so many opportunities out there.
There is. And I think that's half the problem with ag at the moment is that ag's lost the narrative in the marketplace, especially within the media and the political sphere. And so visual storytelling is part of that, being able to provide a great story. So you, Al, you do both. You've got AgriShots where people can, pay a subscription, get on, they can download all the images they want. Did you say 30,000 images? Was that the number?
There's 60,000 at the moment, and sort of every month there's 2,000 to 3,000 new files going up. So it's always growing. Awesome.
There's a buttload of images there, but also you personally do photography, obviously, for family businesses or for corporates to be able to tell their story in their image. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have some exclusive packages for those that want that sort of stuff. And I think going back to your point before, I think as an industry, like we really need to understand the currency of our ag stories and what we do. Like Australia is, one of the best countries in the world at producing food and fibre for the world and for Australia. And we really shouldn't be afraid to tell that story. And one of the best ways to do it, I think a lot of people struggle for those words. So one of the best ways to do it is to tell that story visually. And there's lots of really great things that farmers and businesses can actually do themselves to do that without having to get someone like me out there to do it or any other photographer. There's lots of really cool things we can do. Like a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body. But we all do if we just stop and actually become present with what it is that we're doing and realise that it has an impact and someone has something to learn from what it is that we're doing in agriculture.
Yeah, appreciate that. That's great. So Al, we're starting to get towards the end. Is there anything else you'd like to add in before we get to the last couple of questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this has been very focused on me for this, and I wouldn't be doing AgriShots justice if I didn't actually, bring to the attention my team. I'm really just the ideas girl. I'm the one that captures the magic of farming and what goes on out there in the field. But my team, they're the ones that make it come to life and function well on the website and make it accessible to companies and are always doing the upgrades. So, I'm not a tech person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm fully the creative, and I'm very lucky to have a team behind me who, often aren't in the forefront of what I do that really bring it to the table.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good lesson, Al, for most people if they're entrepreneurial or wanting to grow their business or be successful, is the secret to success is who, not how. Quite often in life, we want to start the process because we're control freaks and we want to do everything ourselves and we don't want to spend any money paying other people to do things. But if you want to get to a really high level of success, you've got to surround yourself with great people. And I talk about professional advisors. You need to have great ones around you, but you also need to have great employees or team members or business partners, those people that can support you on the journey.
Absolutely. Can I just add to that? I think that not knowing how to do something can actually be something that stops a lot of people from starting in the first place as well. So it can have the reverse effect. I was once the everything girl and had to do it all, but there have been elements of my business where I go, well, I don't know how to do that. So I just keep putting it to the side because I don't know how, until I found someone who, did have that skill set and could help me with that.
And that's really important because your unique zone, so the place that you're really good at it, passionate about, and going to add the most value is, as you said, the ideas and the creative and to drive the business forward. Whereas there's other people out there that just love the IT and they love they love the computers and the coding and the editing and the admin. There's people that love that stuff. So you just got to find the right people to go into that field. That's like me. I'm really, really good at some things and I'm really crap at other things. And what I try and do is get those things I'm crap at, get someone who is good at it and loves it to be able to add, and then the 1 + 1 = 3.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. And that's what I've spent my career trying to do. So Al, that's some really important points. Where can people find more about you online? Give us the directions and we'll put these in the show notes.
I've got 2 websites. You've got agrishots.com or almabin.com.
So Al, I like to ask all of my guests this because it really gives some reflection on if I had my time again. So if you could go back in a time machine and have a deep conversation with 20-something-year-old, let's say 25-year-old Al, what piece of advice would you give that young lass?
Gosh, I guess, I'd probably go so much to say that we can't change the cards that we're dealt, but we can choose how we play them. For me to acknowledge that if one part of my story was different, like just one single part, I wouldn't be the woman that I am today. And that's been a big realization for me. As I said earlier, everything happens for a reason. And sadly, not sadly, that's the reason. It took me a little bit longer to work out what that reason was for me. But essentially, my mess has become my message. And as a child, I didn't get the acknowledgement I was chasing, but I now have a career and a business where, I'm out there creating acknowledgement for the ag industry through visual storytelling. So I think it's done a full circle.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. My mess has become my message. That's a cracker. Okay, Al. Well, look, thanks so much for today. There's some absolute gold in there that I've written down. I think I do this every time I interview someone, but I get all my notes and then I keep them because there's some gold in there. Thanks very much for your time. And I look forward to getting onto AgriShots and using them for the financial blokey imagery going forward.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Well, there was a couple of things out of that I just want to tie off before we head off today. Now, the first one is maybe that adverse situation that you've experienced in your life, maybe some challenges that you've faced, or maybe your personality type could actually be your superpower. I want you to take that away today. Me, I have an ADHD type personality or a nervous system. That is absolutely my superpower. It does have some challenges, but hey, when I'm focused on the right things, nobody can stop me. Number 2, change your state. Al mentioned that a couple of times today. She mentioned playing with her dog, how that changed her out of a bit of a funk or a negative mindset. She also talked about the extreme end, which was, she'd had a bit of a tough challenge and she packed up and went to New Zealand for 4 or 5 days living in the scrub. And I think that's a really important point. If you're in business, especially a family business, and you've got yourself into a bit of a rut or a bit of a funk and you just don't seem to get yourself out of it, I'd highly recommend do something to change your state. Go do something tough, do some hard exercise, get a change of state, go on a holiday, just get away from things to try and change that as soon as you can and find out what your change of state could be. If it is your dog, if it is riding your horse, when things are tough, go give that a go to try and change your state. And just remember, there's something called the knowing-doing gap. So you know what you need to do, but you don't do it. So if you get away today, if you've written some notes or you've got one thing out of today, make sure you write down that one thing you'll do to implement that little bit of advice or that little gold nugget that you've got from Al and actually start to take action, because the knowing-doing gap is real and I see it all the time. So that's it for today. Thanks for investing your time. I'll see you in the next episode.